Good afternoon. My name is Angel Reyes. I'll be going over observational studies. We'll be focusing on cohort studies primarily. To spice up this lesson, I've invited my research assistant. Welcome, Ezekiel, our research assistant for this lesson. Ezekiel is going to help us really hone in on these competencies and skills. Now, to start off, observational studies, in my own words, are kind of like looky-loo studies. You know, you're never really interacting or engaging with people or your participants or your data. You're just more so looking at it. You're just observing, trying to find patterns, trends, inferences. Now, cohort studies is a type of observational study. A good advantage of these studies is that it allows for understanding the exposure, and also it gives information on health outcomes. What are health outcomes? Well, one example is diabetes. Two disadvantages is that it takes up a lot of time and there's a risk of participant mortality. Participant mortality is sort of an internal threat. It's something that can put your study in danger. Now, retrospective cohort studies just means you're going back in time. Two advantages is that it uses secondary data sources, but if you don't have access to it or you have trouble, you're going to have a really hard time completing your study. A unique thing about retrospective cohort studies is that you start out with a desired health outcome in mind as opposed to a cohort. And you'll see why continuing on. Looking at this timeline, we have past, present, and future. We're trying to find what's called the baseline. The baseline is the present, and this is what's going to help you determine what type of cohort study this is. Being that is retrospective, you're going back in time. You're also starting with the baseline for the health outcome. So if you're trying to study diabetes, what is the current status? You're also trying to find people of that cohort and their experience in the previous past. Retrospective, back in time. Two advantages to prospective, going into the future, is that it helps you understand the risk or exposure. Secondly, the primary data allows you complete access because you're the individual taking that data. You don't have to ask for it. Now, a disadvantage is that it can cost a lot of money, and it also relies upon your methods and skill about collecting that primary data. Now, same thing, we're looking for the baseline. We're looking to find out where it is, and it's in the same spot, the present. The baseline is always the present, and because it's prospective, you're going into the future. You're going to start with your cohort. That's how you're going to know the risk or exposure that these people were exposed. And you're going to study their health outcomes. You're going to study, hey, this happened to you guys. Let's see what happens in, let's say, 20 days. Oh man, you guys got sick. Well, that exposure is probably linked to it. Cause and effect relationships. Prospective, the future. Now let's move on to ambidirectional. These are the three types of cohort studies. Ambidirectional has an advantage that it gets the best of both worlds. However, because it gets the best of both worlds, it does take a lot longer because you're doing both of these types of studies, retro and prospective. Now, where's that baseline? The baseline is the present, and because it's ambidirectional, it's going in the back and it's going in the front. It's going forward and backwards. So one unique thing is that you start out with a cohort, but not just any cohort. is a cohort with a specific health outcome. You're going to try and understand their exposure, and you're going to see what develops of their exposure. So this is pretty unique in the sense if you had to figure it out, they're doing quite a bit. They're doing a lot. So just think about if it's going in the present to the past, present to the future, the same study, well, and bidirectional. Both ways. Well, I apologize for the technical difficulties. So, again, retrospective, back in time. Prospective, going towards the future. And bidirectional, both ways. The 3 different types of cohort studies. Now let's take this example here. We have 2 young bees trying to get their hands on the new honey on the rocks. And honey on the rocks is only sold in Beetopia. As we can see, our exclusion criteria right here, as Riziki, our researcher, has noticed, is that he notices that only 21 plus bees only, and they have to wear a mask. So it's not just anyone that is able to enter Beetopia. And also not everyone in Beetopia is going to try this new honey on the rocks. Yes, my research assistant is kind of curious as to what exactly is going on in Beetopia, but hey, only bees know. So after gathering his data, he waits 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and yes, on the 5th day, he follows up. He notices in his follow-up that these 2 bees are completely sick. They are completely ill. Well, now you get to figure out, hey, what type of cohort study was performed here? So you can pause the video, try and guess it, or maybe you know. I mean, hey, anyone's guess. So, Rizikio, what type of cohort study do you think this is? Oh, okay. Well, discussion post, comments, well, guess I'll see your answer. Well, our research assistant thinks that it is ambidextrous. Well, it is not ambidextrous, as we can tell in his face. Let's try it for a second time. Retrospective? No, not quite. Prospective. Yes, it is absolutely a prospective cohort study. Well, let's begin first. Why is it a cohort study? Well, these bees were linked together to an event. We did not go and experiment, we just observed. We saw these 2 bees drinking the new honey on the rocks. Now, why is it not a retrospective? Well, we never went backwards in time. We only went forward. And again, we went forward. It's prospective because we went forward in time. We waited 5 whole days. Now let's break it down. Here are our exposed cohort population. Now, this is the risk or exposure. The Looky-Loo, Rizikio, he is the person observing and conducting the study. And this is most important, the non-exposed participants. Not everyone in Beetopia took a drink of the new honey on the rocks. So it's very important that you have your exposed population and not exposed population. So let's model it in a different way if that didn't quite help you. We have the honey on the rock study. Exposed and not exposed. We have 2 different stratified groups. Well, of the exposed, you can either be ill or not ill, along with the not exposed, because we need something relevant to, related to. Now, what is sort of the end game here? Well, sort of the end game is to figure out the relative risk. We want to know exactly how powerful is that cause and effect relationship. Our duty is to understand what is the risk of drinking honey on the rocks. So to summarize, observational studies can be nicknamed looky-loo studies. Cohort studies can be prospective, retrospective, or even ambidirectional. Observational studies are great for examining effects, cause and relationship. A well-designed retrospective cohort study can be a great alternative study when there isn't a lot of funding available. Why is this? Remember, secondary data sources. If you're university students or if you're a researcher, you have access to a huge database. So let's leverage it. And also you can email the individuals or stakeholders involved. Here are the references, and it was wonderful spending this time with you. Till next time.